Recording in progress.
Hey, so we have Michael Watts today. Welcome to, the podcast, Disrupting Doctors' Careers. So I want to introduce Michael because I met him through LinkedIn, like I meet a lot of doctors these days, so they don't get out the house as much as I used to. But he's also an NHS clinical entrepreneur. Waving the flag for entrepreneurialism in healthcare, and has a really interesting background of how he's progressed from doctor life to business life in health tech with a capital T. So I'm doing all the things today. So what we're going to focus on for today's conversation is really addressing a question that doctors face, or they come up to me with, which I can't always strictly answer, is how do you turn your idea into tech? And usually it's a health tech related idea. So why tech? We all know, tech is a sexy word at the moment, and it can really help you scale a really good solution. But let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into that, as actually what is that process like? We know a lot of doctors in particular are just killing it with health tech companies they founded themselves. None of these people used to actually work in tech, but they are leading tech companies. So how did they get from, I've got an idea, to, oh my God, my company's worth billions and I'm influencing millions across the world? So without further ado, welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So let's start with you and Blüm Health. So tell us a bit about Blüm Health before we start.
Okay, so Blüm was founded off the back of an idea that we had. So it was myself and two co-founders. Between us, there was a doctor, a software engineer, and a UX designer. Sounds like the start of a really bad joke. And together, we had a few ideas, and we came together and tried to execute one of them. And we realized that it needed so much funding, it was just never going to work. It was a baby app in a nutshell. You took a 1-second video of your baby every day, and then you could also record all the things in the Red Book. Basically, just giving parents control of their child's sort of first year of life. But we needed loads of funding for it, and realized actually this is really, really hard. It was just as the pandemic was hitting, there was, nobody was there. There was no support infrastructure other than things like the clinical entrepreneur program and things that were already around and still being able to maintain themselves through the pandemic. And so actually we said, why don't we just focus on trying to enable people to be able to deliver digital solutions through COVID? So we were founded in the pandemic. We know nothing else other than remote working and, trying to support people that are, incredibly busy. So we found that Blüm has become an enabler for digital health innovation. We support solo entrepreneurs. We support NHS trusts actually turn ideas to reality by being flexible to their needs, being flexible to their time commitments, being flexible to their financial status. So, and because of that, we've been able to have some really impactful projects that we've been able to work on. And I think one of the things that COVID has done is it's been able to break down into a more granular focus. What does it take to prove a concept? And I think if you can prove a concept, you stand yourself in really good stead. And obviously we'll delve a bit deeper into what proof of concept actually means, because I think that's the problem. We don't actually know what proof of concept means. So all we aimed at was really getting people from that 0 to 1, proving that concept so that they can then fly. Whether they fly with us or not, we hope they do, but that's not something that we commit them to. So yeah, we've only been around for a few years. We've been focused on sort of delivering highly impactful software as a service for digital health, and also making sure that it's NHS ready. So making sure it's compliant, making sure that we understand the regulatory field, because obviously there's no point building something that's not clinically safe. So obviously being a doctor by background, that is has been the sort of USP, if you were, when compared to software dev houses.
I think that's really great. You've mentioned quite a few things I really want to pick your brains about within that. And let's step back to, you mentioned that you had an idea for a baby app, converting the Red Book. For all of you that in the UK that may know, the Red Book is like childhood immunizations and growth charts and all that jazz for your kids as they grow. So why did you, how did that come up as an idea in the first place? Like, why was it important to you and your team?
We were at a hackathon, and I think one of the challenges was around vaccinations in third world countries for mums.
Going back, how did you get to this hackathon?
So
I'm literally walking you back, because a lot of doctors are like, wait, you went to a hackathon? Like, which hackathon? How did you even know about this hackathon? Why come to join this hackathon?
It's a good point, actually, because I don't know if I could actually put my finger on where this all started, but I think it all started at Doctorpreneurs, which is a really nice community of people like me, you know, medical student at the time, junior doctors, everyone from sort of wanting to join university to actually consultants or retired have joined this community. And there was, I just started to join these communities, subscribe to newsletters, just listen to what was happening in the industry. This was like 2017, and just learn from other people, watch them present and go to conferences. It's great when you're a student because it's relatively cheap. But so I just started to immerse myself in this community that was, at the time, you know, wasn't the normal thing to do. You know, like it's very much recognized now as, you know, clinical entrepreneurism is a thing. Whereas back then it was kind of like, okay, you're a group of sort of people that want to do something a little bit different, and you don't quite know what that difference is, but that's what you're trying to solve. And so I started to go to these things. I went to one of these startup schools, and there was a hackathon there where one of the workshops was to solve a problem. And so a hackathon is basically you have a short amount of time to solve an issue with a range of people, a team. And so we came up with an idea that was we were going to support third world, we were going to support parents in third world countries with their vaccination reminders through SMS. And then someone came along to us and said, it's a great idea, actually, but you're going to need loads of funding. Do something in the UK and then do that as a separate phase. So that's where Blüm Baby came from. We actually had a, you know, sort of what I would now see as a phase 4 project, or phase 3, phase 4 project, which was, you know, really impactful. But actually someone told us to bring it back to, you know, what can you deliver here that can generate enough credibility and presence to actually then go and do something internationally that is going to make an even bigger difference than you're already doing in the UK. So effectively, it was about learning before trying and doing, but then actually a lot of the learning that I did was whilst doing. So I think it's about trying something that to you feels right and it has a clear focus. There was no particular reason that we focused on parent tech. We just found an opportunity, and when we looked into it a bit deeper, actually we realized there was a gap in the market. So that gap, as far as I understand, still remains unfilled. So yeah, Blüm Baby was really that sort of opportunity. But with COVID hitting around the time that we were looking to start the project or, you know, start to go live with testing, it became more of a want and not a need. And I think that was the other thing that we recognized, is that there were more immediate needs through the pandemic that we had to address, recognizing our skills, and Blüm Baby wasn't that. So unfortunately it didn't take off, but it's still in the armory. It's still waiting to be produced. It's just waiting for that right time and opportunity.
So I mean, I think that's great, because it demonstrates that, you know, a lot of this is about courage as well. It's like stepping outside of the box and moving towards what feels right to you at the time. And you're never going to have the full answers. You're never going to know whether it's going to be like your life forever. No one ever knows that. But actually going into a room and collaborating with people you don't know kind of goes against your kind of initial, you know, urges. So I think it's fantastic that you managed to create something hugely valuable within that, and it kind of gave you a blueprint to say, well, what can I do next?
Yeah.
Right. So I'd love to hear a bit more from you about your role as a doctor in these multi-professional tech teams. So what did you notice when in that hackathon when you were first working with you said a UX designer and a programmer? So what was the first thing you noticed? Like, what kind of value did you bring to that team?
So I think that the main thing that we noticed was that our skills were complementary, and I think that's one of the important learning points from this kind of idea to reality, is recognizing what you bring to the table and what others bring to the table, and ensuring there is no overlap. Because I always bump into, I'll have like 4 medical students come up to me and say, I've got this really good idea, will you help us get it off the ground? And I'm like, wait a minute, there's 4 of you with one idea. But
as a doctor in that scenario, what did you bring to the table?
So I would say that it's about those clinical insights, that finding those opportunities, finding those problems to solve them. Technical or software engineers have great capability to be able to increase efficiencies through software development, but actually applying that clinically is really difficult to do, because there's ways in which we have to do things as a healthcare professional to provide a service. So I think it was understanding the system is the first thing. So understanding how the NHS works is really difficult for people outside of healthcare professions, but then also being able to have enough insight to be able to say, I can see where there's holes that need filling, and this is how we fill it with that digital solution. So that was really how we complemented one another between technical team and non-technical team, which was effectively me.
I think that's fantastic. And going back to your comment about proof of concept, do you find that working in a collaborative way and with your clinical insights as a doctor, it's much easier to then prove it? That makes any sense?
Sure, it is. I mean, one of the main barriers to innovation is imposter syndrome and the feeling of, effectively being a fraudster and not being in that position to be able to implement change. So that's imposter syndrome by definition, I guess. But so having that credibility of being a doctor and saying, I know this process manually, and now I have a digital version that is going to save time, improve patient experience, and actually save money because of those 2 first things. For the NHS, that's still having an impact, but it's having an impact in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do clinically. We are all still providing impact to the NHS. It's about how you deliver that impact. For some people that is, seeing so many patients in a clinic. To some, that is being a medical director of a trust. And to myself, it was about being able to provide a digital service to impact on as many people within a population as possible. So yeah, that was really where having that idea around proof of concept and actually how big is the problem, that was one of the things that I would focus on first, before actually thinking about the solution.
So Mike, I really appreciate your insights on this, and let's go through like a very common scenario that doctors tend to face when they have an idea. So let's create an avatar. I love creating avatars for storytelling. Yeah. So we have Syra, right? So Syra is a doctor, and Syra has like an amazing idea, which is she's working in obs and gynae. And basically the idea is she's noticed that the wait lists are considerably long and patients aren't getting in for their gynae operations within 6 to 8 weeks, and actually she feels that there are solutions to get them down to 2 weeks, especially those that really could need those could benefit from an operation sooner. So like, for example, those that have heavy periods or that kind of stuff. Anyway, so she's thinking, can we do something to improve the current systems that exist to try and get that wait time down?
Okay.
So she's got an idea. What would be some of the challenges she may face in exploring a tech solution for that?
So I think it's so the first thing is time, having the time to actually spend looking at the size of the problem. I think, this is someone that probably already has a full-time job and is now going to embark on pretty much more than another full-time job, because innovation and entrepreneurialism does engulf your life. And I think so finding the time to look into the problem in a lot more detail, what the size of the problem is there anyone else that's already solving this problem, what's happening outside of the UK, that's all going to take a lot of time. So that is the instant barrier, right? That will hit her straight away. She will not have the time to be able to do this. So effective time management is really important. And actually, do you reduce spending time in other things to be able to do that? That's the first thing that Sarah needs to decide. Once she's decided that she's going to commit to this, who can she surround herself with to give her the insights into how she might solve that problem? So she knows how big the problem is. She's got a few ideas of how she might do this, whether it might be through, software as a service, using some data analytics, but she's a doctor. She doesn't have those insights, or she might not have those insights to a good enough degree to be able to deliver a service. So actually, surrounding herself with people that have those skills, going to these hackathons, going to these programs that the NHS runs, such as the Clinical Entrepreneur Program, the other, there's lots of accelerators in and around London and other parts of the world. Speaking to the local academic health science network is always a good starting point, because they will put you in touch with academics, they'll put you in touch with researchers that can go and find that problem and solve it for you, or with you, should I say. And they have the time to be able to do that, and they have the funding to be able to support that as well. So that's what they're there for, is to validate a problem or a concept with you, so that you don't have to spend all hours that God sends to be able to do that. So finding a team, finding the time to do it, and then actually understanding the landscape that you're then going to have to navigate. So looking into the regulatory compliance, this is going to be handling patient data. There's going to be a whole host of GDPR compliance and data security, cybersecurity issues around that. So again, it's understanding this field that Sarah is now embarking on. And then ultimately it's going to come down to cost, because she's not going to be able to do this alone. So where do we find funding from? And that can be, this is quite clearly a good initiative, because it's going to be saving funding for the NHS. It's going to improve patient outcomes. So it's a really good project for public grant funding. And, there are sort of other funds available, local authority funds, private investment funds, that will actually support this kind of project, because ultimately it's an NHS impact project and will improve the service provision of that particular specialty. So yeah, in a nutshell, the initial hurdles that Sarah will have to cover are time, team, and funding, as well as regulation.
I really love that. Time, team, and funding.
Yeah, I wish the funding began with a T as well, but yeah, it doesn't quite work, does it?
Yeah, no, I think you've made some really valid points there, and especially the first point, which is essentially the market research. Mm-hmm. So we all have problems, but actually most of the time that problem is either currently being sold or solved, yeah, or not that big a problem, or not that urgent a problem, perceived to be urgent, let's put it that way. And so yeah, the market research thing is probably one of the most important aspects of it, because you will need to then move forward to decide what is the best solution for this, and then proof of concept. Yeah. And overall it is about commitment. It's about not just time commitment, but actually the emotional commitment in many ways. Because as you described, going down the entrepreneurial route, whether that's intrapreneurial, where you're working within an organization and innovating within an organization, or entrepreneurial, where you're doing it kind of off your own back from scratch, it takes a huge amount of work, a huge amount of sacrifice. Mm-hmm. We're talking about, time, money, family, everything, because it's a huge chunk of time. Yeah. And we're looking at timelines. I think this is something that tends to be underestimated a lot. I mean, how long, again, it's a piece of string, mm-hmm, but from your average, say, NHS doctor who doesn't have the networks, et cetera, to go from A to B to develop an idea to reality, mm-hmm, what would be the timeline to get an MVP off the ground? I'm talking about a minimum viable product, for those of you that don't know the acronym. Yeah.
It's impacted by a lot of things, mm-hmm, such as, like you say, your network, how much funding you have obviously will help, and how much infrastructure you have around proving the concept once you've got that MVP. Generally, if it's truly minimum viable product, so it's truly the minimum you need, uh-huh, to actually take it to a position where it's live and being used, then, you should be able to deliver something in 6 to 12 months. Now, again, that will depend on how easy it is to test it. And if it's in a hospital, it's going to be incredibly hard, because you're going to have to demonstrate safety. You're going to have to demonstrate some evidence base around your proposal and your claims. But again, that's why the earlier you engage with academic health science networks, accelerators, they're all there to speed up that process. So, you know, you can see now there's companies that have been around for 10 to 15 years that have only just gone live because of the complexity of the tech. And then likewise, you've got really sort of, you know, almost overnight impact from solutions because they've done the minimum amount to demonstrate value, and then it's been adopted because it was an imminent need through either the pandemic or something else. So it is, you know, generally give or take, you know, you have a 5-year plan normally with any business. You should be really getting to a position where you can demonstrate value and deliver services to patients or whoever your end user is within, but, you know, by the end of year 1, I would say.
Well, I think that's interesting because I talk about positioning here and there when it comes to doctors changing careers, but also it's about the positioning of the company or the solution that you're providing. And positioning counts for everything in the sense that, you know, you referenced the pandemic quite a few times, and certain products have really flourished in the pandemic because it's been perceived as to be great use and imminent, whereas in others that may have been around for a while, may not have been perceived as useful or valuable. And like a really basic example, telemedicine. Pre-pandemic, telemedicine was kind of available but seen as really hugely risky. You know, let's not put too much emphasis on that because we'll miss things. But now, like the significant proportion of, you know, private but also public sector are relying on telemedicine to deliver standard basic healthcare. And it, you know, it is just the timing that is the main difference there, right?
So it is. I mean, there's a really nice, as the good saying, which is change occurs when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. So I'll say that again. Change occurs when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. So what that basically means is when you can demonstrate that the change that you want to implement is a path of least resistance or an easier way of providing care than what currently exists, there is no reason why it shouldn't be adopted. If it's not being adopted, you're not demonstrating the pain of change easily enough. So that is the way that you have to think about these things. You never talk about how much something is going to cost within the NHS. Always talk about how much money it's going to save, how much it's going to improve outcomes. Because if you just demonstrate a cost, an invoice, it won't cut the mustard. It won't be acceptable because we need to be demonstrating that actually what we're offering is significantly better than the status quo.
Transformational change, I think, is the key words that I'm thinking of in that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's been around for a while, that word, you know, digital transformation. And I think only now do we understand, well, you know, certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, do we now know what digital transformation within healthcare truly means. And I think obviously the COVID was a catalyst to that. So I think that is something that, you know, there's obviously a lot of negatives around the pandemic, but what it has done is lower that threshold to adoption, which has given, you know, SMEs an opportunity to demonstrate the value that they want to provide.
I mean, this is a good opportunity to go back to doctors who are doing it by themselves. Some are coding by themselves. Some are bootstrapping and outsourcing. Companies like yourself, people like yourselves, but you know, developers. We know there's plenty of developers around at the moment charging an F-load, an F-load of cash. And we don't really know as doctors what we're paying for because no one really understands coding, and coding comes in so many different languages these days. So I identify that in particular is a struggle that doctors but doctors in particular tend to face when they're deciding what developer do I choose or pick and what is right for my product. So what advice would you give to doctors in that situation who are trying to outsource, at least at the early stage, to a developer, and how to actually assess whether they're the best for their product or they're ideal or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to do. To find the perfect co-founder, especially like a CTO that to be, is really difficult, because you're going to have to ask them to do things, for free or for equity as part of your co-foundership, and that then means that you're going on a journey, and it's probably too early to embark on that sort of commitment. So some people like to demonstrate some value through a very simple sort of MVP, or something that might even be a manual process, or a semi-digitalized process. So for example, the Blüm baby solution that we spoke about, actually we started out by asking parents to send in their videos of 30 seconds, and we would cut it down to 1 second, and then we would string them together and send them back. That's what we were doing to prove concept, right? That didn't cost us a penny. So there's clever ways to actually prove concept before you need that digital solution. So I would say, think about whether or not you need to go straight to the corporate software system that you're asking for, because again, you're right, that does get expensive, but there is always a other option, and it's finding that other option that it creates the entrepreneur in you to be able to try and find a different way of getting to the same end result. So that's the main thing. Otherwise, shop around, explore different options, give it a go yourself. I've never touched sort of coding and learning how to code, because I focused on what I thought I was good at. So I think it's about recognizing what you're interested in, and whether you're interested in actually creating the solution, or being part of that solution and enabling someone else to come on that journey with you. So I would always recommend a co-founding tech member that would do the first bit with you. And I guess the main thing from that is, I would only embark on an actual company once you've got some kind of traction with that person, because then it saves you having to have the conversations of, we've got this far, but where do we go from here? Because, we're totally misaligned, which obviously it's always good to have those conversations up front. So co-founding team member, then look at, other ways of doing the same thing. And then finally, just shop around and get a good feel for the options that you've got and the ways that
how do you identify whether your co-founding team member or chief technical officer, you mentioned CTO, is any good? Like how do you objectively assess that? It's just like when we're talking about doctor recruitment, how do you know if a doctor is any good? And so we would know how to do that, right? Especially medical footprints, but as doctors we know what good doctors look like, what bad doctors look like. So similar in the engineering world, how does one assess when they're not familiar with software at all, or hiring, or what to look for? What are the kind of, I say easy wins, but the basics that they should either be asking or looking for or checking or doing their due diligence on?
So I think that the important thing is experience. Experience is everything in software engineering, from my understanding. Those that have been around in the technical space for 10, 15, 20 years, they just understand what it takes to build something that is viable. That is a skill that it can be learned, but actually it's part of going through the development process time and time again, and becoming more efficient at it. So definitely experience is good. Shared vision is always important, because actually if that person is just doing this in their spare time, and they're not moving at the same pace as you, you're never really going to be able to see eye to eye, because you've got very different plans, you've got very different time commitments. You need someone that's on the same page as you, that's going to give it 100%, because if you're giving it 100% and they're giving it 50%, unless you strike some kind of collaborative deal, which again is part of what I was saying earlier, is strike that deal at the right time, then you're going to have that misalignment. So but ultimately go with your gut. If this person is really passionate about what you're doing, understands where your vision is from a clinical perspective, because obviously they're going to have a technical vision, and in how they instill all of that experience and knowledge, and that's equally, if not more important than the clinical side. They go perfectly hand in hand. So actually it is that knowledge share, and it's that bouncing back and forth. If you're not getting that, then that is a red flag that actually this person is doing this because they feel that they need a career change, but actually they're not sharing the vision. So again, just go with your gut and have those conversations early, be really transparent with one another, and you'll always find a solution to any kind of problem that you come across. And if you aren't finding solutions, chances are it's not going to be sustainable.
What happens if you get it wrong? What are the kind of outcomes that one might experience? I mean, getting it wrong is like standard. It's a standard, you're pretty much statistically likely to get it wrong on the first go, second go, third go, fourth go. But yeah, what kind of challenges could doctors face when they are going down that journey?
Yeah.
How do they best mitigate them?
I think the best way to mitigate, so obviously it depends on how severe the critical incident is. You can go anywhere from falling to failing. I hate the word failure because I feel like even if you fail, you've not failed, which is why I call it falling. And I can't remember, I think it was Simon Sinek that said it's about falling, not failing. So it's about those falls and being able to fall fast and get back up and move and do something differently. So the more time you spend on the ground, chances are the more the less likely you are going to be able to get back up and carry on. So the best way to mitigate that is by looking ahead of you and looking at what the future looks like. Are you getting the clients that you thought you were getting? Is your resource costing effective? Is everyone generating enough value for what you need to be able to do? Is this actually, are there other people in the market that are now doing what you're doing and you didn't foresee that was going to happen 6-12 months ago? So unless you have that spatial awareness, quite literally, you will fall. So it's really about understanding, what's coming up, what the future looks like, as well as what you've learned previously, and being able to always keep that on track. And being reactive is everything as an SME. You can be proactive, you can try and prevent these things, but noticing that something is about to go wrong and then trying to, I hate this word, pivot before you hit it is really important. But also staying reactive to change. We manage change on a day-by-day basis, whereas I know corporate organizations might manage change in a week or a month. So it is about staying reactive to needs and clients and being able to make sure that you always have that kind of that safety in front of you to try and prevent any falls.
Brilliant. As doctors, we aren't used to failing, stroke falling.
Exactly.
It's just not really in our vocabularies. I mean, even since we were at school, we've spent our time passing exam after exam after assessment after, even, I don't know, I probably graduated a while before you, but I remember we had negative marking for guessing questions, things like that, right? And so our level of risk taking is fairly high. Like, we don't take risks and so actually in order to be a doctor and go into building a business, entrepreneurialism, all of that jazz, you're actually working against your inner, what we've been trained to do in many ways.
You are, and you're fighting that person that you know so well, which is, everything is evidence-based, everything is written in the books, and actually you're doing things now that has never been done before, because if it has been done before, please stop doing it, because the chances are it's not going to work again, because there's no point reinventing the wheel. So yeah, it's totally at risk, and it is about how do you manage that risk. But that is something that we as clinicians are good at, is managing risk, putting things in place to actually mitigate risk. We always safety net our patients, because we know that there's always a risk. And so it is about using those skills as a clinician, effective communication, working as a team, and managing risk, that actually you can transfer over to that commercial world and that impact that you want to be able to provide in a different way. So there are a lot of skills. I would say that there's a lot to be learned, and there are effective ways of learning it through academia or through accelerators, but ultimately it is it's polar opposite. I can't express how different a world it is, but they both have their sort of alignments, which is great.
100%. And this is why doctors actually have great potential in being incredible health tech founders. So if you're listening and some of this resonates and you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable but excited, it's for you. Uncomfortable is great.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a great sign.
Yeah. Discomfort is good because it means you want it. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you have that drive because something's not right, you'll do something about it.
100%. Well, thank you so much, Mike. It was a really insightful, interesting conversation. And obviously the next bit is the call to action, or the call to contact if people want to get hold of you. please
Sure.
tell us what's the best way of reaching out to Michael Watts.
So yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. It is just Michael Watts. Take a look at the Blüm website as well. That's just bloomhealth.co.uk. You can see the wider team. So obviously the technical team are there, and so go and chat to them about the techie stuff. But yeah, you know, I'm always at conferences. I like to publish conferences and funding on my LinkedIn. I try and use it as a way of actually sharing knowledge rather than just posting about me all the time.
Yeah, but I also want to hear a bit about your football club.
Oh, which football club?
How many have you got? How many do you work with?
As in which? Oh, the one I support or the one I work with?
What? Both.
Okay. Well, I'm a Forest fan, which is obviously a good time to be a Forest fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've done a few other bits and bobs as a sort of portfolio junior doctor. So I am the academy doctor at Peterborough United, which is great. So I do that sort of ad hoc, which is quite nice. It's mainly weekends again, which is you know, fits into my schedule well. But that's because I've always been interested in sports and exercise medicine, really. So it's just keeping those interests going through everything.
And you're still doing some other clinical work on the side as well, right?
Still working in acute medicine, yeah.
So everyone who's listening, as a doctor, if you think you can't have it all, you can have it all. You definitely
take
can.
A break, yeah. Make sure you take breaks, because yeah, you know, time management is key. Time management is absolutely everything, but you know, you've got to correlate that to your drive as well.
100%. That's a really great way to end this. So anyway, thank you so much for your time, Mike. And for those of you listening, watching, please stay tuned for some really amazing interviews and further solo muses from me.
Thank you.